All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Webster. Welcome to this next Dare to Be Great bronze session sponsored by IAED. It is my honor to introduce Brian Dale. Take it off.
Thanks, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, based on where you are. As let me said, my name is Brian Dale. I'm the Director of Medical and Quality Control for the International Academies of Emergency Dispatch. And this session is on what we call strength-based feedback. In recent years, starting in 2018, 2019, the Academy started changing our feedback process, knowing that we got the moniker for being the protocol police, or the mean people that tear people down, tell them all the things that they did wrong. And so we're really looking at changing that and making it less scary and a more positive experience for both sides of the equation. So we'll talk about a little bit about what has happened or what the problems have been for traditional feedback, why it doesn't work, benefits of this strength-based feedback approach. And then there's actually a formulary that we have designed for all the three different versions of feedback. So strength-based formulas that allow people to create in their mind or in their writing skill a process or a template to give this type of feedback, which makes it easier. So I want you to think about, those times when you've gotten feedback from someone about performance. And you get into these things like people talk about the feedback sandwich. For every one thing bad, two things good. Like we can't see through that about 3 or 4 times. And so when we start looking at it, the feedback that we typically get does not leave us with good feelings. And even when the person is trying to give us good, positive feedback, things come across as artificial. I've met people who actually created on a Word document positive comments they could add into a feedback, copy and paste. I even saw one where the person that did it actually misspelled a word, and so every time you saw it, this word was misspelled. The feedback process has, I think, for many, many years been broken in how people get and receive feedback, how it makes them feel, how it makes them perform in the future. So as we start looking at this, think about when you have been in that feedback position of either giving or receiving, and how does it make you feel? How has it impacted you moving forward? So when you start talking about this, and I think we would all recognize this to be true, for every one thing that you're told that is something that's going correct, realize that people will hold, it takes 3 times more psychological weight for bad experiences than good. So it's a 3-to-1 ratio. I've even seen things that say it's probably closer to 5. So when you're looking at that, you've told them one thing or 3 things that have been phenomenal, but the thing that sticks in their mind is that one thing you told them was wrong. And there's some real reasons why that occurs. There's some psychological things that occur when you're getting feedback that stick in the back of your brain. They're there. And so when you start looking at it, we need to come through that. Part of this is our history. I mean, growing up in public safety, from an ambulance person is an EMT to a firefighter, paramedic, all the way up to a fire chief here in Salt Lake City, our history is part of what we know. It's part of what we do, and it's part of our problem. For many systems, especially in the emergency communication center, that old adage, no news is good news. Someone only comes and talks to me when something goes wrong. So when I got feedback, it was, oh my gosh, I'm going to the woodshed this morning. And even the good news seemed somewhat canned or a little bit fake to me. The feedback was usually regarding a mistake that you made, something didn't go right, somebody complained. And so when my supervisor wants to talk to me about something, I have this sense of dread even going into that conversation. And the thing that has always bothered me, and it still bothers me today, is the history of false or inaccurate praise. You did a great job, but, or good job on customer service. There is nothing that is more fake than those kinds of comments, because it doesn't help me get better. It doesn't tell me exactly what I did that you want me to replicate the next time I'm in that same situation. And the comments I'm going to show you are actual case review feedback that has come to me in some way from emergency dispatchers or dispatch quality assurance staff. In this case, you failed to complete something, right? So in that sentence, the dispatcher is focusing on 2 words: I failed. Again, anything else in that messaging could have been well written, constructed well, but the thing they focus on is the fact that I've been told that I failed on something. This was discussed in last week's meeting, but you still chose the wrong chief complaint. Oh, I go to training and I'm still an idiot, which, for myself might be true. But when you're looking at this, think about that impact. If you give me something and I can't see your facial expressions, I'm not in the room with you, I just get to read this. Think about the impact that that's having when they can't discuss it. They just read this comment. Again, we have a habit of doing things like, people's lives are at stake or they're at risk when we make these mistakes. There's no value in that. It doesn't help me construct a better plan to move forward. It doesn't help me understand what the problem was, what my action should have been, how I can improve next time. It just reminds me once again that I've made some terrible mistake. And then for my personal disfavorment of a comment is this one right here. This was a good case, but for the dispatcher, I stopped listening right there. A good case doesn't tell me exactly what I did that was good. It's false. And then I'm going to tell you what you did wrong. Yeah, it was okay, but you did these 4 things wrong. Do better next time. When you start looking at these things and you look at our history, there is a focus on the grading piece. I'm looking for something that went wrong. That's why I'm listening to the case. No, it's not. You're listening to or you're reviewing a performance to hear everything. What were the attributes or the strengths that the dispatcher displayed? What were things that were okay? And were there things that could do better? And if there were those things, how do we describe how this person could improve their performance when they're faced with a same or similar scenario in the next 2 minutes or next 20 minutes or next 20 years? And then another real good example of false praise is that was a good example of customer service. Well, what did I do relating to this caller that was good customer service type etiquette? You're not giving me any feedback that says, oh yeah, I remember when I had to calm her down, or I remember when I had to talk that child through, stopping bleeding on someone. So when you're looking at those things, that's that false praise. It doesn't do anything. And most dispatchers would tell you they would rather get nothing than this false praise type of a scenario. So as we look at this and we look at trying to make it better, we have to understand a couple of things. Our problems are that we were never really taught how to do this. When I first started doing case review and patient care report view as a brand new paramedic firefighter captain, I had no training, I had no mentoring, and I was told to, make sure these things there are any mistakes in these cases. Make sure there are no patient care errors in the charting on this patient. And then in dispatch, it was the same thing. Listen to the review, and if you find mistakes or not following the scripts, let them know. So I'm focusing on grading. And rarely did I ever about the impact to the dispatchers I was working with, because the feedback they were getting more often than not was in a written format from me to them. They weren't sitting down with me and having a conversation. They were getting 3 or 4 of these documents from me, and they were looking at my feedback. And then, it was already an interesting relationship because I wasn't working in the comm center all the time. And I was in my own office, and I would spend time in the tape room doing the CAPE reviews, but I wasn't giving them a lot of direct feedback until much later on in this process. So when you start thinking about that, those are some of those things. And the other thing is, if you have more than one person doing case review, more than one person reviewing cases, writing feedback, then that means there's that many ways of completing a form or a feedback document. And again, how you write, how I write is going to be different, more than likely. And as you look at this, start thinking about how that we could agree. There could be 3 of us listening to the case, and yep, we all agree that these things were good. These things could have been better. but how we write the feedback could deliver 3 separate messages to the person that's receiving that feedback from us. So at the end of the day, if you think about what feedback is supposed to do, the intent is to ensure that our emergency dispatchers are upholding the expected standard of practice. And one thing is we're supposed to be the dispatcher's advocate. This is a very difficult job that very few people understand and very few people can do with all the things that are coming at them. They have 3 seconds to make a decision here. They've got all these multitasking things they have to do. And I can sit back and play and pause and look up something in a manual, or I can call a friend. And these dispatchers are doing it click, 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 in the heat of the moment. So we need to try to be their advocate where we possibly can. Look at the variables a dispatcher is dealing with. It's to improve the dispatchers and the protocol that you're using, the performance of that tool. It's not just about what the dispatcher did. Is the system working like it's supposed to? Are there improvements that we can use? And if so, some of this is going to be education, right? So we're supposed to be able to provide guidance, education, and finally, don't be a jerk. And I'm serious, really, there's no reason to just focus on grading and write some, I have to write something, so I'll put something down about whatever. I mean, there needs to be a methodology to this. There needs to be a workflow that the dispatchers understand what it looks like. They can expect what's going to be coming at them. They know they can have a two-way conversation about this. And the feedback they're getting is designed not to just tell them what happened, but also how they can do better in the future. So we're not tearing them down emotionally. We're trying to help them understand and get better and do that job to the best of their ability the next time they're in that same or similar situation, right? So some ideas here. We're talking about character strength, and we'll talk more about this in just a moment. But it's the positive parts of your personality that impact how you think, feel, and act. And how I can build upon those character strengths and reinforce those, that's going to make you do better, and also appreciate the fact that we're having these conversations. And then the feed forward interview is a way for helping people envision a positive future instead of a failed past. If you think about what in the problem we've had is in this question instruction, there's nothing that person can do to go back and change the past. There's absolutely nothing they can do. But what they can do is understand why that question or that instruction was important under these circumstances the next time they face that same situation. So that's the premise of this strength-based feedback, is what is the strength that they should be exhibiting or they did exhibit, and in the future forward, how can they do better in the future when they're posed with that same problem? So talking about some of those strengths, and quite honestly, Kim Rigdon brought this to the Academy's attention when she was going through her bachelor's degree, and start talking about some of those strengths. What are the strengths that these people are using with consistency? I mean, every single day: empathy, creativity, try to solving those problems that they're faced when they're dealing with these different situations, leadership, positive actions toward the scene or the person who's calling or the subject or whatever the case may be, consistency, courage. These are the strengths that people have. When this was first implemented or brought to our attention, I actually printed off something we use in our curriculum and I left it on my desk. So every time I'm writing feedback, I can see some of the examples of the strengths that people are exhibiting. And after a while, it becomes something that's easier and easier to use. Once you get the formula down, and it seems to come with much more ease and more fluid when I'm writing, but I still have those little sheets that help me get through that. When you're looking at some of the strength-based feedback, when we implemented this, we got some feedback from some of the people that we were working with and talking with. Tony said, before dispatchers were only focused on errors and what they did wrong. And again, that's a big problem. The call takers would physically cringe when queues walked into the room and asking, who are they coming after today? I was in a department in Southern California, and we walked into the couple of queues and myself walk into the communications center, and man, I'm telling you what, the temperature in that room dropped 10 degrees. There was a noticeable tension that came into the room because, again, they're always telling them what they did wrong. They're always being the administration's hammer. And so that some of that is attitude and some of it is the process that they're using, right? So when you're looking at this, by changing that environment, now the focus on mentoring and training by finding the good in every call. Sometimes it can be hard, but there's always something. It really fixed the EDQ call taker, the quality assurance and call taker relationship. And I agree with that. I've seen that happen over and over and over again. We have lots of people that have come back after using this and have told us that it is working for them, it's working for their agency, and why did it take us so long to figure it out? So when you start looking at this process, if you're going to engage and have that growth mindset and think about how I can improve my skill set in giving feedback and writing this information so that the dispatchers are able to take away something positive, they can understand, yeah, I didn't do that right. Most dispatchers are harder on themselves than I would ever be as a quality assurance person. They know when they do something wrong and they're very critical of their actions when they do them. Fine, let's find a way to help them improve when they face that kind of a situation in the next scenario. So here are some of the benefits to this strength-based feedback. It's a consistent format for everyone. I've been told this by many dispatchers that I've worked with and spoken to, that they always feel like they have to figure out the person's writing style and the message that they're being given from that person or from 2 or 3 or 4 different people. So it's a consistent format that everyone can engage in. It's not hard to learn. If I can learn it, it can be learned fairly easily. It can be used in place of that sandwich style feedback, you know, good, bad, good, and all those variations of that scenario. It does improve morale of the call takers. It removes some of that, you're going to tear me down. I walk out here thinking, am I a good person? Should I be here? There's some dispatchers are okay with just blunt feedback. When I was a mentor for a paramedic program many years ago, dude, you got to pull traction on that IV when you start, you know, on the vein when you start the IV. You're going too deep on your intubation. It wasn't a warm and fuzzy experience, but also I think the attitude of most paramedics is that person knew they were better than me anyway, so they didn't care. But in the dispatch environment, some people are okay with blunt feedback, but most are not. And again, the environment is different. You're not face to face. You're looking at a form or a document. You may be getting an email based on where you are, and how that message is perceived by me is going to be the difference between something that I can use and something I just resent every time I get it. It does increase the job satisfaction for those in roles where they have to give feedback frequently. I mean, this is what I do day in and day out. I listen to cases, I do feedback, I provide information to different committees. That's my job. It does improve motivation and it does better improve performance, because part of that writing style is based on not just quality assurance, the bean counting, the grading, but the improvement process of education and understanding of the dispatchers. If something is confusing them or if they're not doing something correctly, the type of feedback they can take and go, oh, now I get it. It provides a framework for future action rather than just a description of a past behavior. And again, going back to that, I can't change what I did yesterday when I took that call for chest pain, but I understand somebody is also I can bring to bear on that to make the caller more apt to work with me during that case, and it overcomes the negativity bias. Again, I always know when I talk to the Qs or my supervisor about a case I did, it's going to be a negative experience. So it's going to be a negative impact on me based on what they found. They always have to find something wrong. And so as you look at that, those are just some of the strengths and some of the benefits we can reap from altering how we provide feedback to our dispatchers. So there's 3 different types. There's performance recognition, where they've exceeded the performance expectations that you have set. There's performance improvement, where they can get better at a specific performance. And there's performance maintenance, which is the caller did their job, the dispatcher did their job, the dispatch tools did their job. It was a basic compliant case, which is what you're going to find more often than not. And so when you're looking at, there's 3 different ways of managing this feedback when those 3 scenarios are identified. So for the performance recognition, there's the scenario. There is a strength plus an action that they took plus an outcome. And that becomes that strength-based feedback for recognition, or the formula for performance recognition. So when you're looking at this, when you're looking about strengths as traits versus strengths as competencies, the goal is to identify the objective elements of the situation. The giver does not need to know the person's inherent traits to study that character strength that they have exhibited. I don't have to have an in-depth knowledge of a dispatcher to know that they were empathetic, but they were also very leadership driven in getting the caller to perform an action, getting grandma off the bed so they could do CPR, getting someone who's scared of blood to put pressure on a direct wound of someone who is, bleeding seriously. So when you're looking at this, the strengths are behaviors that can be readily identified in people. So when you're looking at this, that's what we're trying to bring to bear here, is those character strengths that we observed by listening to that audio file. When we're looking at performance improvement, we have something called a future forward intro. In the future, when you are presented with those kinds of things, plus the situation or scenario, plus a strength if possible. Just because they didn't do something right doesn't mean they were not empathetic, or they weren't, showing honesty. They weren't doing things in that case that were positive. Plus perhaps it is sticking with the scripted process. Perhaps it is understanding that a person is screaming at them not because they're mad at them, but because they're scared. Right? What is the corrective action we need to deal with? And then the education reason. Here's how it benefits you if you will do this. That becomes the strength-based feedback for process improvement. So some of those future forward intro examples, and this is something else I had to learn when I first learned this from Kim. When you encounter, if you find yourself in the future, be ready to, if you're faced with, again, that's that future forward. The next time this happens, do this. That sets them up in a process where now you're helping them understand when they have to deal with this, here's how you would manage that better going forward. If you're writing this, they know they made a mistake in that same situation in the case that you were giving them feedback on, right? So you're helping them understand the positive aspects of how they can do better the next time they're faced with that. You're not focusing on, you failed to do this. There's that benefit that we're talking about. Into the future, it propels the receiver into the future where they can change things instead of pushing them into the past where they can't fix or alter anything. They can't change what they did yesterday. So, and the other one is performance maintenance. This just simply means let's not make things warm and flowery and fuzzy when the dispatcher did their job. The caller was non-problematic. The scene wasn't problematic. The system tools worked. And again, if I were writing this, I might say something like, compliant case or another compliant review, no additional comments needed. I'm not going to try to make something out of something that doesn't need to be, expounded upon any great deal. I think the dispatchers get tired of writing it. So when I do write something positive, when I do write that strength-based feedback for performance improvement or for performance recognition, they stay on and they look at it, what I've written. That's the intent, is to let them see and hear what's going on so that they're getting that the next time. The college, if you are an Academy member, the college has several lessons on strength-based feedback. You can go and take those and engage more in this dialogue and how to do it better and some of the more core concepts behind it at the Academy's college, https://learn.emergencydispatch.org. And that was weird. Also, at the end of this lesson, this is a strength-based feedback kind of a cheat sheet that you can download. When you're dealing with that, you can download this and then print it off. This is kind of the same kind of cheat sheet that I used when we first implemented this when I was doing more case reviews than I do now. So when you're talking about the power of strength-based feedback, when you're looking at it, let's look at some examples. And what Kim has done here, again, this is Kim Rigdon's lecture that I'm stealing for today because she had a family emergency. She has the scenario colored in purple, the strength in blue, action in orange, and the outcome in green. In putting this virtual conference in the middle of the pandemic, the folks within the trenches worked hard and showed a lot of creativity and perseverance. This allowed attendees to access great training they would otherwise have missed. So again, here's an example of a strength-based recognition type feedback. Kim Rigdon has a family emergency that prevented her from being here today. Brian Dale immediately stepped in and offered his to give this presentation. His kindness and strong public speaking skills, she's lying here, meant that no one who signed up for the session would be disappointed. But again, you can see how she's putting a scenario, a strength, an action, and an outcome together in a sentence. So let's look at that, what that might look like. The next time a 911 caller is rude to you, take a calm, deep breath and remember that this is their worst day. This will give you a second to think before you respond, right? So again, you're putting this together, future forward, the next time, and then the situation or the scenario, the strength, the action, and the education or reason for doing that. Now, consider the prudence of completing your PowerPoint slides at least a few days before your presentation. That will, if you have to cancel, the person who subs for you will have an adequate time to review them. She's blaming herself for me in that situation. So when you're looking at this, again, we're combining these scenarios into this formulary that helps me understand better how to write it. So when the person is reading this, I don't have to be sitting in front of them. I don't feel like they're attacking. I'm not saying that the person failed or what have you. Everything's done. That's how you can do better next time. So let me give you an example. I think sometimes people get a little confused with strength-based feedback because they think they have to write over everything they say as they listen to a case and they're giving feedback, and that's not true. When there are specific points during the case where you may want to make a performance recognition or a performance improvement statement, and you would use those things in that scenario. So this one is relevant to a case that has been reviewed. During the case, enter the initial part of the case compliant. No comments are warranted. There's no problems during the initial address, phone number, chief complaint selection process. That's so that nothing was written other than this is a compliant case, no comments are warranted. The dispatcher chose unconsciousness. That was appropriate for this incident. Okay, fine. Now, in this one, in the future, when a caller spontaneously provides that the patient is in and out of it, trust your knowledge and training that this indeed constitutes not alert. Answer the question. There's no need to clarify. Right? So you can see there's a performance improvement comment there, and that's how it's been written into this template, if you will. And then in DLS, dispatch life support, they're telling the person what to do until emergency responders arrive. When a caller seemed impatient, you used considerable empathy and explained to her help was on the way and that the instructions would help her mother until responders arrived. And again, I'm telling them what they did well here. Considerable empathy, explain that help was on the way. And we've all heard those callers that get frustrated and upset because we're not responding fast enough. We're not, why you ask me all these questions? Why are they not here yet? Remember, people in time of crisis have a telescoping time frame. For every 10 seconds that goes by in reality, a minute has passed in their life, right? And so it's important for us to be able to capture that this dispatcher in this incident did this thing exceedingly well. Not good job on calming her down. Again, that doesn't tell me what I did well, so I can do that again and again and again when I'm in that same situation. And then for the dispatch code, they're telling you what they did was appropriate there, no problems. And then for customer service, good use of empathy and compassion, getting her to stay on the line. I like your tone and rate of speech and getting her, getting her to ensure her mother was actually breathing. So when you're looking at this stuff, these are those things where, good job on customer service versus what this dispatch queue had written using that strength-based feedback approach for recognition of good performance. Twice in this case, one that performance improvement scenario. That's how you could move that into a template. And if you think about it, if everybody were to use not just this template, but a template where you divide the call any way you want, you can talk about CAD, you can talk about protocol, however you do it, and they're using strength-based feedback appropriately, I could have 3 cues, 2 cues, 4 cues, and as long as we're all using that same general template, I have my writing style, Kim will have yours, you have your own. But again, if you're using a template with a process for the strength-based feedback, it's easier for the dispatcher to decipher the information that's coming up then and what they expect that dispatcher to do. It really, really does work. And again, when you're looking at that performance maintenance feedback, there doesn't have to be a lot of written feedback. This was a compliant case, no additional feedback necessary. There doesn't have to be a lot of, if you have a comment, if you notice something, please let them know what it was, but don't cheat. Don't, yeah, good job on DLS, good job on chief complaint selection. That doesn't tell them anything. That doesn't help them go, oh, I remember, because he was all vague about his answers and I got him to give me the right answer. Yeah, okay. They can see what they did and how it was at least to the standard of practice, and they will repeat that behavior again and again. If they're getting the feedback that what they did was correct and it was specific to that action and that character trait, they will repeat it. If you stay with this process, it does work. The other couple things to go over or to cover. Number one, strength-based feedback is not an entire workflow for feedback. This is just one element in that story that you have to create when you're giving feedback about a given incident. It becomes an important part when you're telling the story and you want to tell them how in this scenario, in this situation, in this instance, they exceed the expectations by doing this. There's an audio file that we have come on to recently from a Dispatcher of the Year nomination that was made. And this person, a worker, is in cardiac arrest on the side of the road. And the dispatcher is working with this and getting them to do compressions. And at the end of the case, when paramedics are walking up, she says, are they with him now? Yeah, they're just walking up. Well, you did a very good job. I want you to know you did 367 compressions. They'll take over. You did very, very well. I'd never heard a dispatcher tell somebody how many compressions they had done. And her voice was, even though this is a tragic event when somebody's in cardiac arrest, obviously, the fact that she is encouraging this gentleman that he did a good job, he did this many compressions, and the paramedics are now taking over. That was pretty cool. I have to say, when I heard that, I was very impressed with that comment. It was very, very well timed. It didn't sound cavalier. It was just well done. Using strength-based feedback inside of a template that everyone uses. If it's just you doing the case review and feedback, even that can help with people understanding the message and getting the correct feedback. If you're using some type of a simplistic template in that flow of writing feedback to the dispatcher based on what you heard as you go through the case. It tells a similar story using a similar style. So again, they're used to getting that feedback in a specific method. They're not trying to figure out the verbal, nonverbal message, right? Because if you're looking at that, it does reduce the need for interpretation of emotion. If you are telling me a story and I'm reading frustration, anger, degrading feelings in how you're writing to me, whatever attempt you're making at making a connection with me and getting me to change my behavior is lost. If I'm reading that you are fed up with me or you're angry with me, there's no way that I'm going to take that written feedback and make a positive or do something else to try to fix that. It becomes this confrontation almost between the dispatcher and the person giving that feedback. When you are looking at someone and you're reading their emotions or body language, where their hands are placed, how they're facing you or not facing you, the rise and fall of the emotion in their voice, that's all interpreted quickly. But if I don't have any of that, just looking at a document, like I'm getting the information, just from what's there and not from looking at someone's face or their emotions or smile or lack of smile, whatever it is, that's going to change the message. And by having that consistent format and flow of the feedback back to that emergency dispatcher, you can remove at least some of that interpreted need. Is there emotion there that I'm not seeing? Is this person in a bad mood? What's wrong with him today? He's being a jerk, right? Looking at those kinds of things is also an important part of this process. So, getting feedback correctly matters. It is one of, if not the most common complaints that I hear from emergency dispatchers about what they don't like. I don't think they dislike feedback. I mean, if you're a paramedic, if you're a firefighter, if you're a police officer, you're going to get feedback on your performance. You have to be tested, you get reviewed. It is one of those things, right? It's a system making sure that the people working within that system have the right feedback, the right training, right education to their job correctly and safely. But if it's the process of getting feedback from someone else becomes such a negative experience, it puts a block on communication, it puts a block on improving performance, and it can degrade relationships within the communication center as well. It's not something you just do. You've got to practice this. You have to engage in it. You have to, as an emergency dispatch quality assurance person, a supervisor, trainer, you have to have the growth mindset, being willing to alter how you do things so it makes a better impact on those that you work with. You have to practice it. And when I first started doing this, I asked people to read it and tell me what you thought. Sometimes it was like, I think you're saying good job there. I'm not sure, but I think that's what you're saying. And when I was, when I heard something that was not correct, I had to be very careful because I'm a fairly blunt person. So I had to be very careful in how I crafted that language. So I'm focusing on that future forward, what they can do better if they were placed in that same situation again. And there has to be an acknowledgement that this is new for you. And I'm going to try something. We're going to do this or that. And it may not be perfect. And I'm going to continue to work on my feedback. Let's talk about how that goes over and what I can do better as I'm trying to improve how I'm communicating with the dispatchers within the center. And the other thing about this communication process, it needs to be constant and it needs to be a two-way, where if I thought that was okay, why is it not okay for me to do this? Or why do I have to clarify this situation? The caller was asked, I asked the question, they answered it. There's nothing vague there. Why did you want me to clarify? So when you're looking at this, if it's a two-way conversation, when it needs to be, and when you're going to have a harder conversation, you should try to do it face-to-face. So emotion is not interpreted but seen, right? So when you're looking at this, there's a methodology here that you're going to have to play with. If you're in a large center, if you're in a small center, it may look slightly different. But the foundations of this, of using strength-based feedback, using those character strengths that we talked about earlier, and then constructing this feedback into a formulary where I'm doing it in a precise way so they get used to what that looks like as it occurs. Those are all ways that we can improve upon how we do dispatch feedback, how they engage in that feedback process, and how we can impact them in the future and how we can make it better for them moving forward. I know I'm a little bit early. I wasn't sure how much time it would take me to go through Kim's slides, and I apologize for being a little bit early, but typically people aren't too mad when you let them go a little early. But I end with one of my favorite quotes from quality assurance, and that is, if better is possible, good is not enough. And with that, if you need to, or want to reach me or have any questions moving forward, or you want copies of this PowerPoint in PDF format, you can certainly reach me at my email, brian.dale@emergencydispatch.org. And then my direct line here in Salt Lake City, 801-746-5689. And my mobile number is also there, 801-550-0187. And then Emily, I know you can see questions. If there are any questions from the group. I think I lost Emily, you guys. There she is. I think you're still muted, Emily.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Doesn't look like there's any questions in the question box. So yeah, so thank you, Brian, for a great presentation, and thank you everyone for attending. Don't forget about the keynote presentation at 1:45. We'll see you guys all there.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.